Okay, so I'm going to narrate these clips as we do the lecture Go Tell the Spartans. And so this is just a little introductory note to that, which is this is what I would do if we were in class together. This first section is, as you'll have seen by the title slide, is about the people. And I'm going to do the French, the Vietnamese, and the Americans. Yeah. So this is the French inheritance, basically. You're not actually going to see the French themselves, but you're going to see the inheritance. Okay.
Now you're meant to wear those tiger-striped Frenchified fatigues? Strictly unauthorized in this command, aren't they?
Well, sir, I like to allow the men some freedom in the field, sir, for the sake of esprit, you know.
Esprit. French word, I believe, isn't it?
I believe so.
You know what happened to the French in this country? They got the shit kicked out of them. And that's not going to happen to the U.S. Army, is it?
No, sir.
Okay, so here's a direct reference at the beginning of the film, near the beginning of the film, where the colonel, who soon to be a general, is the point. And he wants, they're ambitious. These are military men. Their job is, these are not draftees. These are people who are career military, right? So that this is their profession, and there are professional military, millions of them, really. And there always have been. There haven't been as many as there are now. But in this case, both of these men will have been 20-year-olds. That is, both of the major and so the Burt Lancaster character with a cigar, and the colonel who gets his friend who has now outranks him, will have been young men in their 20s during World War II. Will then have served in Korea and are now being posted to Vietnam. And you can see that the colonel is intent upon becoming a general, and the major is stuck because of his dalliance with a general's wife. Okay, so the discussion, though, is about the tiger stripe camouflage. The tiger stripe camouflage was something which was liked by the French because basically they thought it looked cool, and so is the habit of wearing a scarf, like a neckerchief. It's very European and not American. So you'll see that sort of as a holdover. So when the two men get together and the colonel comes off the helicopter, that is, he's arrived to inspect the unit and make sure that everything is going according to plan, he says, I see that your men are wearing non-regulation fatigues in the field. And Barker says, yeah, it helps esprit de corps. That is, it's good for the men's morale. And the colonel says, esprit, that's a French word, right? We know what happened to the French. And what happened to the French, as you'll remember from my amazing lecture a couple of weeks ago, or whenever you last looked at them, if you did, was the long colonial heritage, and then the battle, culminating with the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, which was a complete disaster for the French, where the Vietnamese wrote the rules and forced the French out of the country because they lost. So that's what happened to the French, and as he says, that's not going to happen to the Americans. This whole discussion is because it already has happened after the end of the war. This film was made after the end of the war, 2 years after the war finishes, is exactly what happens to America. And the Americans at this point know it. A lot of them don't want to admit it. So that's what the discussion is about.
You read French, Corporal?
Fairly well, sir. I think it refers to the Battle of Thermopylae, where the 300 Spartans died trying to hold the pass. If you remember your Greek history, sir.
Yeah.
It says, roughly, stranger, when you find us lying here, go tell the Spartans we obeyed their orders.
You think there's 300 French buried here?
I'll count them first chance I get, sir.
In this next clip, we see the title of the original. Well, this is the title that the film became "Go Tell the Spartans" because of this famous little history lesson. And the history lesson goes back a long way. It goes back 2,000 years more, 2,500 years to 430. I'm trying to remember BCE, when Leonidas held this and the Spartans, the 300 Spartans, plus some other stuff which doesn't get recorded, held the pass against the Persian hordes of some, they've said millions. It wasn't millions, but anyway, lots of people for 3 days, and gave the Greeks, the Athenians, enough time basically to rally their forces so that they could win the next battles. That's the moral of the story of the 300. So the parallel here is that the French understood themselves to be in a similarly heroic position, that here's this graveyard where the French are trying to give meaning to their dead. And they're saying the reason that these men died is because they were holding the pass against the invading horde. The corporal and the lieutenant have this discussion where the corporal understands the historical importance and the lieutenant has no idea. And it's clear the corporal is better educated and is from an elite, the elite middle class, basically, where the lieutenant is, he's doing his job. I mean, he will have come probably from a military family and have been trained to be military, and so this is a job to him. And he's a true believer, but this is not the same as Corporal Corsi. So the discussion here is about basically what are the Americans actually doing in Vietnam? And the corporal understands that their mission that they've been tasked with is a historic one, where they've been this little tiny, they've been tasked with protecting this domino so that it does not fall, which is the same thing as the 300 of the pass, right? That you got to protect this pass for 3 days and die. And everybody's got to die. And that's going to be a happy ending, because if you protected the pass for 3 days and it allows you to pull back your army and save your army to fight and win the next 2 battles, which is what's going to happen for the Greeks, well, then it was a victory, and you have to honor those deaths. So this whole thing is this very complex reference to the past. So what do you need to get, basically? Okay, so it's a reference to the past. And in referencing the past, this historic struggle, you are saying that's why the present makes sense. That's why what we're doing is worthwhile. And you're also making sense of the colonial past, because the French did this too. And of course, now we can't but see it as being an omen, an ill omen for the future in America. Now, we already know, as I say, the film was released in 1977. We already know what's going to happen. We know what the future is going to be. And the future is going to be the Americans are going to be slaughtered, just like everybody else. Except that first they're going to massively outkill the Vietnamese, right? So it's complex, but this is a very useful moment.